In my opinion, the American dream is false hope. It's the guise or the pretense that individuals can move up in class systems through effort, through meritocracy, that their merit-based energies and efforts are going to be rewarded economically. And in that process, they can move from lower class to middle class to upper class in a traditional three-class system of lower, middle, and upper.
It exists. I just think it's an expectation more than a dream.
You know, it's still there, but it's not as easily obtained anymore.
The lower class will stay lower class because there's just not as many opportunities. They are looked upon as lower people. You feel as if they're less than you. And when people start to think that, they start to believe it. So the lower class feels as if they'll stay there. And then there's things in place where lower class, they're not even considered for secondary education.
I think that it's really one of the most important things. And I think that it's a tragedy that we're not putting forth that much effort, you know, into academia.
Lower class does not have the same opportunities as middle and upper class. I feel as if in our country today, if you are a lower class, you will stay there.
I don't believe that the lower class has the same opportunities as the upper class. I think that there's, you know, of course we all have like some similar opportunities and there's some equalizing opportunities out there, but mostly it is kind of, you know, a birth lottery kind of thing going on.
The only way that you can participate in society is if you have privilege. If you don't have privilege, then you're being, you know, left out and you don't have a voice. I believe that a person's voice and their education is their power.
I think that everyone should have the same opportunity for education as the next person. I mean, I don't see why it wouldn't be that way. I don't see why it shouldn't be that way, because when everyone has the same opportunity to make this a great place, then, I mean, like simplistically speaking, I suppose that would give it a greater chance of being a greater place.
That there is one single problem is what we want people to focus on. There's many things that go into that. There's capitalist structures that are kind of embedded in that process. So to say that there's one thing, I would say is fundamentally problematic in that sense. There's so many things that intersect that create and re-perpetuate forms of oppressed ways of thinking. Right? These are the discursive, hegemonic processes that go into oppression in class-based systems. And so I think part of this is that there's multiple systemic things and importantly, I think regional issues that are kind of going on to recognize the varied ways that things go into this process of what the struggle is at the time.
The culture of the youth is very much shifted from a very African perspective to one that has adopted a lot of the values of the West. Whether it is good or bad, we can see it manifesting in different ways. If you look at the youth specifically in the areas we have visited right now, issues of identity has come in, which of course is linked to culture.
Forced oppression, racist segregation, sexist ideologies, rampant homophobic, all these kinds of issues, that is what's claimed, like that is what we're doing.
With regard to economics, of course it's comparable to America. It's very neoliberal capitalist system that tries to throw in a bit of social welfare, you know, in small doses, not as very streamlined, very structured as it is in America, but there is a bit of assistance that's given to people in the lower end of the economic spectrum, for lack of a better word. They get a bit of stipend, which is by no means enough to sustain a family.
You see, these people live here, they don't have electricity, they don't have running waters, they don't have toilets. So the riot was because of that.
The biggest comparison, I would say, would be the disparity, economic disparity. The inequalities are just so vast, and it's just been getting worse since 1994 because of, again, the capitalist impetus, you know, investment. Again, that's the criticism, it's neoliberal thinking.
Of course, if you look around the economic systems of the world, how that has shaped our culture over here, especially coming from societies that have been poverty-stricken into societies now that would want more. Often you find that there's a massive manifestation of greed amongst the youth. You find that they want to acquire things very quickly, and it has become almost one of the core criteria within all, but it's become part of their culture. This that we have to acquire and have to acquire quickly. It does shape and affect the communities in the area as well.
All of these things are a contextual environment that go into the systems of oppression that we as Americans, as a nation, nationally, perpetuate and claim as the greatest part.
If you look at the importance of academic education, it's your ticket out of poverty.
Schools, they're zoned in specific ways to give access and more money and more tax dollars to specific schools, which causes inequity. They're also formed in certain ways where certain teachers go to certain schools. We have like dump schools, right, where teacher is not performing or not doing maybe the best things they need to do. They get dumped in lower socioeconomic schools. And so maybe the education they are getting, the access that they're getting is maybe not the best or the highest quality. I think that's a school system, a national school system that things need to be addressed, but they're regional as well, they're local as well, so along those lines. If we have uneducated kids who aren't able to have access to food, to fresh water, to basic health care, it's kind of hard to maintain, well, what should I struggle for, right? What larger frames of thinking can I work in against?
There's quite a lot of scholarship kind of things offered for previously disadvantaged people, but still not enough for the amount of population that can't afford to go into. And also the actual schooling, they still like even tertiary education to go to the level of passing high school and going into tertiary. Not a lot of them would actually pass because the teachers inside those schools aren't actually doing a good enough job.
Because many people don't have that middle class income to put a child through varsity. And even children who have their parents at middle class income don't always feel themselves able to actually live normally when they're going to varsity. So many of them are working. So bursaries are kind of normal in this country. You don't study, if you're coming from lower middle class or anything lower than that income, you don't have access to that type of funding.
From what we're doing, the American dream is oppression. That is what we do at a fundamental level, and we're proud of it. Proud that other individuals have to serve at our beck and need. And so I think those are the forms of struggle that we need to address and recognize and confront. It's hard to recognize and kind of do and push against those things as a lower class society.